Hi, and welcome to Matt Holman Talks Mental Health, the podcast where I have the opportunity to catch up and meet amazing humans. Today, I have the absolute pleasure in welcoming Anjali to this session. Welcome, Anjali.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
You're more than welcome. And this is a special session because today is the first time we've ever tried to do this, attempting to record 24 episodes of this podcast within 24 hours. And Anjali, you had the pleasure of being the first, and I'm so happy to welcome you.
Yeah.
So Anjali and I have met through social media, through the platform of LinkedIn in particular. Anjali liked some of the things that I was saying, I guess. And so we connected and continued that conversation. And I always knew there was an amazing story here. And I want Anjali to share that with you. So she will, in her own words and her own ways. But welcome and thank you so much for being the first guest on this wonderful day of podcast recordings. And yeah, introduce yourself.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Matthew. To be very honest, I didn't know I would be kicking this off, but it's such an honor to actually do this and do it with 23 other people who are just as amazing and spectacular. It's truly an honor and it's such a privilege to be here with you.
You're welcome. So if you want to introduce yourself so people know who you are, that'd be amazing.
All right. So I always flip out when this question comes, but I'm usually very confused. I do a couple of things, but I'd say I'm here in the capacity of a mental health advocate and a human. I feel I love it because you refer to whenever you're referring to us, you call us amazing humans, and I think that is the tag I would want to go ahead with. So, but otherwise, I am a movement practitioner. I'm also a researcher. I've been working in the corporate world, but I devote a good amount of my time to mental health advocacy and awareness. A lot of my research actually takes a slightly different approach to mental health, which is I talk about mental health through the body. So, I'm talking about embodiment. I'm talking about how our relationships with our bodies, affect the way we also have relationships with our psyche. All of this started off with, conversations around suicide and self-injury, and then has somehow now moved on to a decolonized understanding of healing, where I am a passionate and very passionate advocate of community care, along with self-care. And and I continue to raise awareness, mobilize the community, and conduct workshops wherever I get a chance.
Amazing. What an introduction. So great sort of insights already into what you do, and I can see your passion. I know you're passionate about this subject. So there is a story, and I want you to share that story if you can, please, which is your journey with mental health, which is the theme for all of these podcasts, which is let's get to know you and why you do what you do, and some of your purpose. And I know, and for anybody listening, I know some of this story it might be difficult for people to hear, but this is the reality of talking about our journeys with mental health. So over to you. Tell a story.
Yeah, thank you. I think before I go ahead, I do like to give a trigger warning for anybody who would not want to go ahead, because there are mentions of suicide and there's also mentions of self-injury. So if this is difficult for you, I understand. It's okay. You don't have to go ahead. But if you'd still like to hear it, please do continue. Um, I'd say my journey with mental health actually started back in my childhood itself, but my journey with mental health awareness started about 5 years ago. This was I grew up in a very small town in Uttarakhand, India, and for those of you who don't know what it is, it's a state which is it's a Himalayan state. So we are located in the Himalayan foothills, and we are very close to. We share a border with Nepal, so you can imagine the kind of geography we have, the kind of demographic we have, which also means that public health systems are negligible, because the terrain is difficult. The large parts of my state are underdeveloped. We don't not just know about mental health, we also actively there's a culture of actively stigmatizing it. There's lots of superstitions, there's lots of other things which go around. So while I do say my relationship mental health started when I was a child, because now that I look back at it retrospectively, um, there's a lot that I feel was anxiety. A lot of the things that I did were out of anxiety. A lot of the things I did not understand were happening to me were panic attacks. But my relationship with awareness and what I now call my advocacy work started off after I lost my father to suicide. And this was back in February 2015. Um, Now, before that, I honestly had no articulation of mental health. I did not even know what depression is. I had just heard it here and there because I had an English education, but I really did not know what it's like to live with it, or I did not know what it's like to, live. You lose your parent to it, and I remember I was studying back in New Delhi then, and I came back and um, I honestly, when I came back, I saw my father's and I saw his body. And one of the first things I did was I ran to my mother, because I'd always been the eldest child. I had always been the more responsible one. I didn't even, I say in many ways, didn't process my grief, or I didn't even give it enough consideration. My immediate question was, what is my mother going to do? How is my mother doing? And how's my sister doing? I have a younger sister. First, I ran to my mother, then I ran to my sister. And after all of this hullabaloo was over, and to be very honest, even now, um, the way I remember it, it's like a freak show to me, to be very honest, in the sense that it's very hazy, it's very surreal. And also the fact that, we were now a household of three women.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of other things also. For example, a lot of the things from my mother's drawer, things that she used to wear, like bangles or other things, other jewelry, was thrown out along with my father's body. So it was thrown out and burned. So I feel these ritualistic things also, this kind of frenzy that sort of came over everybody
Yeah.
after the incident is still very, very hazy. And all of that took a toll. And I remember that very day, I just felt like, okay, I am doing fine, I felt very strong, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
Later, I came to know that this was shock.
Mm.
I had gone into shock immediately because I did not, because I immediately jumped to what my responsibilities are going to be. And 2 months down the line, I came back to my normal routine. I studied. I continued my education and everything. And I remember this one day I'm just walking around on the in the park, and I suddenly start crying, and I can't stop. I could not stop, despite the fact that I really, really wanted to. I just did not know why I was crying. I called my cousin brother, who was very close to me back then, and I just said, I don't know why I'm crying. Now, within 2 weeks of this, I found myself in bed, having lost 7 kgs by then. I could not move from my bed. I could not literally get up, even to go to the washroom or something. My friends, my roommates had to help me out. And I think it was then I realized I needed help. So I first went to a psychologist, and this is a counseling psychologist. And also because I was just a student, and I had just lost the only earning member of my family. So I went to a society, and this is a non-profit that gives therapy for free. So I went to them, and seeing the urgency, they did take me on board. Otherwise, there's a huge waiting period as well. I'm very fortunate that I got to connect with the therapist there and then, and
Yeah.
after post which I also saw psychiatric help. So I did also get started on medications and everything. And this sort of ensued like a very I never like to call it a linear healing sort of a period, but I think it started a wave of healing
Okay.
where there were also major setbacks, where there were days when I was feeling fine, but then there were also days where I did not want to live. And I also tried, taking my life a couple of times. I started finding, because a lot of when you lose somebody to suicide, guilt is a huge, huge part of it. There's guilt, there's regret. I used to wake up with nightmares. I used to have flashbacks. I used to imagine, scenarios where we could have saved him, or we could have, or maybe what if he was found earlier, or what if he was, given the right kind of help. What if? So there are so many what ifs in such a situation, and I continue to obsess over them. So, but eventually, with this struggle and with finding the right kind of help, the right kind of support, the right kind of people, I also started getting into raising awareness because I realized I've lost my father to this
Mm.
silence. And it's a very careful silence. It's not a silence where people don't know what's happening. People don't want to know what's happening because the
Yeah.
engagement with emotions is erratic, right? Emotions are not reasonable. You cannot understand emotions per se. You cannot keep them in boxes, so it disturbs us, just like chaos does,
Yeah.
just like uncertainty would. So we don't engage with it. But I decided no more of it. People actually die. People actually die because of mental health conditions. And why aren't many more of us talking about it? Why aren't all of us talking about it? And especially, I feel when it comes to something like self-injury or even issues, something like schizophrenia, and I won't club them in a box together. But then these are, the more grayer areas of mental health conditions.
Sure.
And I think there is a lot of times it's also, this person is just trying to seek attention, or you would easily refer to somebody as a psycho. I feel this this terminology does so much harm.
Yeah.
And I think it is there in my own healing. And that's also when I started engaging with movement, engaging with, and because, like I said, I grew up in a smaller town. So I honestly did not have the articulation. So I used the internet to find as much as possible. I used, internet, Facebook, social media to get in touch with people.
Okay.
And it eventually did work out. I mean, I'm still healing. There are bad days. I lost someone I loved very recently, so I'm still grieving about it.
Yeah.
But I feel the good part about doing the self-work with therapy, the good part about knowing, having the awareness of mental health, is that you know what's going on. So I know the stages of grieving. I also know it's okay to feel so bad on certain days, and it's not the end of the world. And I think that can be a huge, huge relief.
Wow. What an incredible way to start this event, and your story is just so powerful, and you've touched on so many points that bring to life this reality globally, and some of those things that I wanted us to make sure we covered in this conversation, of course, are around the cultural challenges, and you've expressed those quite clearly around where you grew up and the environment you were in, and the stigma that was attached to to mental health issues and challenges, and suicide in particular. And thank you for sharing your real honest experience of what happened. And that thing about shock was quite interesting to hear around, you were just getting into motion of everything I need to do to move on without ever really stopping and addressing those challenges. So it's an incredible story, Anjali. And you and your family moved away, right? You moved into the city,
Yeah.
is that right?
Yeah.
And how was that? Did you find that was more socially acceptable, or there was some more acceptance in there? How was that for you?
Yeah. So yes, my family did move. My family initially, because I was studying in New Delhi, so I had to spend a lot of my time there getting my
Right.
college
Yeah.
degree. Which also meant that my mother and my sister, and by now we also had a dog, Bobo.
Okay.
They were alone in the house. We did have relatives, going in and out, but overall they were lonely in so many ways. So I remember right after I lost my father, there were also people who came to our house, and I'm talking about mental health, not just as an individual
Yep.
condition, but also with social understanding of gender, class, and privileges, and identities, race for that matter. And I do remember, now imagine now somebody's grieving the loss of a husband, and some of my relatives come in and they just go like, "What's the point of your life now?" And they meant it, and they genuinely meant it. They just did not understand what my mother's life should be, or would be, or could be without my father. They
Yeah.
just said that you should also die now. And they made this suggestion in all honesty. Um, post which, I also feel there was also this narrative that started. And this happens when you're not aware, and this happens when you don't know what the mental health condition is. So it becomes gossip, because I feel suicide, or even murders, or death for that matter, these are very uncomfortable things. We don't discuss them because they're uncomfortable. They give us the heebie-jeebies, just to put it in
I love
very
that.
crude
Yeah.
terms.
Yeah.
Yeah. So people don't engage with them. What happens then is that you end up sensationalizing them. It becomes a news piece, so people start also crafting stories. So the
Yeah.
story in my case was that, in my mother's case was that, my mother was somehow responsible for it all. And that all of had a part in it. Whereas the truth was that we were people who struggled most,
Yeah.
not just when after my father died, but also when he was alive, because one can imagine not us not having the tools, the understanding of mental health, or how to even get help for that matter, and living with a father who's also living with that condition. So it's not like I had a very lovable relationship with my father. I had a very difficult relationship with him. My father also used to consume alcohol very regularly. He was very verbally, very, very abusive. There were a couple of times when he also, was physically abusive here and there. But there are these things that, somewhat socially acceptable. I still don't know why. So, and he was, more or less absent from our lives as well. So we also, there became a dynamic where we did not interfere in each other's lives. So now just to see that, this, and then making peace with his death, which happened in such a difficult manner, and then having everybody around you, um, either, stopping you or yelling at you on the street. So my family was unofficially boycotted
Yeah.
from the entire society, because one, we were just three women,
Yeah.
and two, because my father, had died of suicide, and three, because we aren't, my family as a whole, I'm the most talkative one in my family. Everybody else is really quiet and
Right.
really shy, so we also get misunderstood a lot. um, and what ended up happening was, my mother was scared of stepping out of the house. My mother was scared to just go out and get groceries. As a result, both my sister and my mother also lost weight. They they i mean they could I could visibly see that they're losing weight. You could see dark circles under their eyes. And I think it was about 1.5 to 2 years of this, and then one day, my mother just decided that we are just getting out of here.
Yeah.
We had no plan. We just wanted to get to a different city, so we came to a different city, which is called Haldwani, and that is like the center. It's like the urban center of this area. We moved here, found ourselves a rented accommodation, and in the meantime, planned to sell the house. And even as we were selling the house, it got really difficult, because again, because the association of suicide with the house, even though
Yeah.
the incident did not happen within the house itself, doing that and then selling the house, finding a buyer, getting paperwork done, coming here and building a house and purchasing land, and to actually sit in the house that we all constructed and started, from scratch,
Yeah.
I feel is a huge blessing. And I'm glad we just moved to this house in November.
Okay.
So I mean, one can imagine that in the last 6 years, and on this 11th of February, we'll complete 6 years, to not only lose your home. I lost the place I grew up in. My sister lost the school, she was studying in. My
Right.
mother lost her friends. We lost our community. We also lost mountains, because this place doesn't have as many mountains. I loved the place I grew up in.
Sure.
There's a lot we, sort of lost in the process. And I feel a lot of that came because of the stigma. And a lot of that could have been much better if only there were people who stood with us, at the time when we needed them. So I feel stigma does so much damage. So I think the
Yeah.
more than the death itself, the loss itself, stigma just takes it out of you.
Yeah. And the, the challenges, the release for the individual that's gone versus the pain that it leaves, and the suffering, and the all the aftermath of a suicide, of course. And it is very difficult. And yeah, I can only imagine where what your family's been through, and send sort of empathy and compassion towards your thoughts of, where you are. But what you've done is you've moved on forwards, and you've got things going on now. And I really want to just sort of spend a few minutes talking about your work and what what your passion is now, which is really around these subjects to help people. And I love that. So please tell us a little bit about what you're doing and your plans and your direction for the future as well.
Okay. Okay, I do a lot of things,
Yep.
but please don't get confused. That's also because I, as a person, I'm a very action-oriented person. I just like to do things.
Yeah.
Um,
Fair enough.
so yeah, at this point, apart from mental health advocacy and research, I'm also applying for PhDs. So I'm halfway through it, and just as soon as the admissions process resume, I'm hoping to, just start the PhD within by the end of this year, and then hoping to get a doctorate within the next 5 years. And I talk a lot about this because my work, my PhD work, I've always been very adamant on the fact that I know that I'm a part of academia, but
Mhm.
I have been very clear on the fact that if I am the only person, or my academic peers are the only people who understand my work has failed. I need to make my work as grounded as possible, and I need to make it as translatable as possible, because I don't want to get lost in a world where I'm only having a discussion in a classroom and not actually get some grassroots work out of it.
Mm.
So, and because of that, I've switched to medical and social anthropology, and over there my research is focused on understanding public health systems, and the indigenous health systems within the Kumaon region, the part where I am, and especially in relation with women healers, because I do come from a family of healers, people who, my great grandmother used to heal ailments of the gut. My grandmother also did something similar. So there's like a storytelling and narrative and knowledge that is passed down orally.
Yep.
And so I want to bring all of these together and find a nexus where the health system can be improved, not by imposing a public health system, but by actually also giving the right kind of stage to the local community to make decisions for themselves. So that is the overall idea. Apart from that, I have a tiny business of my own. I do work with organic skincare products, and I'll be launching a line of teas very, very soon. So and these are recipes which have been handed down, so you cannot find them anywhere else. I want to use the stuff I grow in my own garden or get suppliers who are farmers in villages. So make sure that everything that's coming out is not only of good quality but also affordable. So one is that. The other is also, I'm into a lot of things.
Why not?
I also write very actively. I have been writing anti-racist articles for quite a while.
Yep.
So I make sure that whatever I feel, and I also pin it down and I get it out. So I've also been doing that work. I also handle a couple of projects for a company I work with. So I'm building a wellness platform for them that will bring healthcare to smaller towns. So, and otherwise, I'm a movement practitioner. I do like to, engage in as much activism as possible, with regards to women's rights. I've done campaign-based work, which is mostly legal work, but now I want to switch to more grassroots and community-based work. Within the next 5 years, and I have this exact scenario in mind, I'm not really sure if it's going to play out that way because life is unpredictable, but I do want to have a tiny place of myself on the mountain somewhere here. And I want to have, I want to have perhaps like a homestay or a guest house sort of a thing, but also hold immersive art experiences, make sure, that generate employment for the local communities. Our state is full of what is known as ghost villages over here. People migrate and they leave villages. They leave their property there. They leave huge grounds over there just because there's no opportunity, there's no healthcare, there's no employment opportunities. Overall, life is very bleak. In very simple terms, and my PhD, my business, all of my other work, activism will lead to this one thing, which is bringing color back. And that's what I call it. I want to bring color back to these villages, to the lives of these communities. I want to have, see them smiling. I want to make sure, not smiling just in the sense, I say smile and they smile, but also have the reason to smile. They have enough financial independence, and that they have healthcare, and that they have community. People are singing together, dancing together. So eventually in the next 5-10 years, that's where I want to be at with all of the stuff that I'm doing currently. So I feel like it's leading up to one goal, even though it feels very, very different.
Yeah. Wow, I'm just fascinated by your story. I'm loving hearing your ambitions and your thoughts, and that place on the side of a mountain sounds idyllic to us, as well. And I'm sure anybody listening is going to feel very similar about those thoughts. But what I love really in all of this is the challenges, the diversity, the issues, the stigma, and everything else is still there. But you've come through and you're doing positive things with it. And I just embrace all of those thoughts and say, look, we can all do more, can't we? We can all really make a difference by just focusing and channeling our positive or our energy towards, reaching out and giving back color. And I love that thought of, bringing color to these people's lives where it's hard and it is difficult for lots of people. And we have it all over the world with that situation right now, of course. And I think that's just amazing. We are at the end of this session. This is flying past. These are going to go. I know. I've absolutely enjoyed everything. I'm going to give you the floor for the last piece. Of course, from my side, I just want to say a huge thank you. You are just an amazing human being, and you have such a wonderful story, which is real, it's true, it's genuine, it's authentic, and it's something that we all should think about being able to tell others. And I just think that's such a wonderful thing. So anything you want to share, or any little pearls of wisdom that you might want to impart on the listeners of this?
I usually refrain from advice, but I think if there is one thing that I have to say, which is, please make people uncomfortable. I feel, in the sense that I strongly encourage crying in the workplace. I strongly encourage, I also encourage being angry, and actually learning to be okay with these difficult emotions, not just all happy all the time. So I feel that for all of us, and it's not just my prerogative or your for that matter, but anybody who's listening to this, anybody, and even for that matter, for somebody who thinks they're doing completely fine, it's not their duty to do anything about mental health, please talk about it.
Yeah.
Please offer support. Please, do your research. Research awareness can make a huge difference. I thought I would never have to deal with mental health until until this situation, until the lack of awareness, stigma took someone from my family. And that we've had to deal with so much trauma. We have had to deal with collective trauma and then heal from it. But it can all be prevented. It can all be made better just if we have a conversation about it, or just by us showing our emotions. I think one of the best things we can do is just be ourselves, be open to unlearning, be open to understanding. We will also make mistakes. All of us come from some form of privilege or the other. It's important to acknowledge it. It's important to also understand that the other person may not have the same kind, and we need to remain compassionate. And I feel like open to unlearning anytime that it needs us to be.
Brilliant. What words of wisdom. Thank you for sharing that. And it's so true. Everything you've said is just so true. We need to talk. We do need to talk about mental health. That's what this is all about as well. We're trying to break down the stigma and the barriers by having these conversations openly and just, having the opportunity to tell our stories. Anjali, thank you so much for participating in this. For anybody that is listening, if you have struggled with any of the content of this, please know there are always people available. I know that we'll have an international audience listening to this, so I can say Samaritans for the UK, which is 116123, but you'd have to look locally for your services. But there is always somebody to talk to and to turn to. Always know that's there, because lots of people struggle thinking they're just alone with their thoughts and their feelings, and they're the only ones that are struggling. You're not. There are lots of people out there that you can talk to. Please do. So Anjali, thank you. That's episode 1 of this Pod-A-Thon.
My pleasure.
Amazing stuff.
Lovely.
Thank you so much. And I will catch up in your progress as well. I look forward to seeing the picture of the place on the mountain.
Okay. You're most welcome to join us.
I'd love to. Brilliant stuff. Thank you.